today's topic is building, for the World Cup, building a small match schedule widget. Who's playing today, who's playing tomorrow. And the World Cup is the biggest event. Now the Spain against Portugal, it's an ongoing match. And so if you search Google, you're looking for data, then World Cup JSON on Google. And there's not really much open data for the World Cup. And so let's look at the small open football World Cup JSON. So the football database provides open data for football tournaments. And for the World Cup, there's a small repository that has pre-built JSON data sets. And not only data sets, a great part of GitHub is you can also use it as an API, JSON API. So let's say for the World Cup, I have 5 services. The main service is the match schedule with the results. If I click on the World Cup JSON, I have the World Cup matches sorted by match days. But if you look at this one, this is kind of like a HTML page. So if you want to read it in your JavaScript, you don't want to have the HTML version, but you want the raw data. So there is something in GitHub which is called raw, and if you use the raw link, you get the real data service. So that's the trick, or it's not the trick, but that's a way to use GitHub as a API JSON HTTP service. And the great part is usually there's a security restriction, so you can only call in JavaScript, you can only call home. And in GitHub, they have the CORS built in, so they allow access from any domain. So that's really, so it's not a hack or anything, so GitHub really, it's built in, and it's a service they offer. So let's get started to build a tiny widget. So let's look at this example. So that's a small example. All we want to do is to list all the upcoming games. And yesterday's game was game number 1, Russia against Saudi Arabia. And today's match they do. There is Egypt, Uruguay, and so on and so forth. And so if I go back, the data, so it's, I do the first, have a list of rounds. So the match day 1 was yesterday. And here I have all the simple data structure, which is team 1, team 2, and then the score, the stadium. So let's get into the source code. So I have the repository, and it's just a single HTML page. So let's look at the first one. And the magic, or it's not the magic, it starts with the script tag, with the JavaScript. How can you fetch data if you have your JavaScript? How can you fetch data? And the answer is the modern JavaScript has a method called fetch. So you can use fetch, and you provide, what you have to provide is the link, the URL. So in this case, I'm using, as mentioned, I'm using the GitHub JSON service. And the important part is not to fetch the HTML page, but to fetch the raw JSON service. So that's why it has raw GitHub user content. So that's the URL for the World Cup JSON. So if I would change it to 2014, I would get Brazil. Or there's the football JSON repository if I want the Austrian Bundesliga. This would be the football JSON, and then instead of a year, you have the football season, would be 2017-18, and then you get the match schedule for Austrian Bundesliga. English Premier League would be EN for English, and the German DE, and so on and so forth. So I can show you this example. Okay, so that's the the football database project on GitHub. And so we've seen the World Cup JSON has its own repo, but the football JSON would be the repositories for the Bundesliga and for the English Premier League, for the Spanish La Liga, and so on and so forth. So you just have to change the link. So going back to the fetch example. Okay, sorry. Oh, here is it. Yeah. So all you do is you provide the link and then fetch, and then it gets the JSON document, and it does, because it can fetch HTML and all other formats. So you have to say you pick JSON, and the great part, if you fetch a JSON file in JavaScript, it automatically gets parsed, and so you can process it without doing any special things. So the second step is, so the first step is I fetch the match schedule, and now I want to build my schedule. And so to build my schedule, I've built a little function, which is build widget, and I get the data is what I get from the service. So in this case, this is I pass it along here, the JSON. And so all I do is, if I go to the example, I go through the match days, and then I print the individual match pair. And so if I go back, yeah. So I'm using modern JavaScript. So in this case, in modern JavaScript, there's something called the multi-line string. And in the multi-line string, it's a backtick. And so the string can be multi-line. So it starts with HTML, the backtick, and it goes all the way here. So this is one string. And inside the string, sorry, here. Here's the backtick. Yeah, sorry. Here's the multi-line in one. But I loop over the data rounds, and I build up the HTML snippet. So I have the event, then I have the match round, the matches, and at the end, all I do is I get this is my tiny page, which has the widget ID, the div block, and I select with get element by ID. I select the div block, and within HTML you can pass along the HTML, and you get your HTML page dynamically built without any. So that's without any framework. So it's plain vanilla JavaScript. So usually what you would do is you would pick a framework, React, Angular, Vue, or there are so many choices. So that's why in this example, usually sometimes it's a good idea to start with the basics. And if you use modern JavaScript, as you have seen, it's not overly complex. It was, but yeah. So, and maybe I can show this one. The console log, it helps for debugging. So if I open up here the console, it should show me the data that gets fetched in the beginning. So if I open up this is the data I have fetched, World Cup, and then it has the match days and every match day. So this is the helping for debug, the console log JSON to check if I get back the data. And I have a second example. The second example is still not using a framework, but let's try this one. So the second example, what's different? So it fetches the data. And what do you want to use instead of having the template inline? it uses a template language. And there's something, this is called nunchucks. It's, if anybody knows Django, Python Django is the most popular or the easiest template language. So the JavaScript version that is the same as the Django template language is from Mozilla. It's called nunchucks. It's, I don't know about the name, but it's the Python Django template language, nunchucks. And it's from Mozilla, nunchucks template. Sorry. Oh. Oh, here it is. So that's the, so it's open source by Mozilla, but so it's a clone in JavaScript of the Python language. And so now if you compare it to the previous version, now the template, it's all in a single string. And for the loops, it's using the template language. Before it was JavaScript. And so all you have to do is you give it the data, and then it merges it together, and you get the HTML snippet. And all I have to do is I have to include the nunchucks library. So I just include it with the script tag. And then the magic happens here. There's the global object nunchucks. And I give it the template, which is the template below. I give it the data that are fetched, which is the World Cup match schedule. And then I get back the HTML as a string, the building block. And then I replace it. I find the widget. So here, that's the HTML page here. And in the body, the widget ID. I get the widget, and then it fills in the HTML that has been built dynamically. And so that's the live page. So if I change here to number 2, there should be no difference. And as homework, so the homework would be, to build a match widget with your framework of choice using Angular or using React, Vue. And and one great part, because it's dynamic, I can use, just change the link, and I get a different match schedule. So the last example, there's no difference other than it's the World Cup in Brazil. So in this case, it's selecting, it's fetching the data, the match schedule 2014, which was the World Cup in Brazil. And so I should get the page. And so the opening was Brazil against Croatia, 3.1. And the last World Cup champion, it was 0-0, Germany against Argentina, and in overtime. So it's missing the overtime, but it's part of the data set. It should be. So if I change here to 2014, I can query the World Cup last time, and it should have the overtime at the last one. So the overtime is extra time, score 1 and score 2 in extra time, and the goal in minute 113. So you are encouraged to use the free data service. And to show you another example, so the first one, if you do World Cup JSON, there's one on GitHub from a guy from Finland, I think. So he has his little World Cup project, and all the data in this little data JSON file. So it has the stadiums, but the nice part is he has in Vue, he has a nice open source application front end. So that's the FIFA World Cup front end code. that's using the few web components. Let's look at this one, the components. Here's the match part. That's how modern JavaScript looks like. So it's way more complex. But to wrap up, how does it look like, you know, when it's running? So that's the running part here. So what you can build, so you encourage next time to use the service and to build the match schedule. You have all the groups, so there are 8 groups, and then there are the finals. And so, for example, to go back to this service here. So here's everything is in one file. Open football. Okay. So the groups, it has the service for the groups. Group A, group, and then there are the stadiums, and there are the standings. So stadiums. So they're the stadiums. And yeah, let's go. Last one, sorry. This one. So here there's a nice little visualization. It has all the stadiums with GeoJSON. So if you provide the latitude and longitude as JSON, and you use a map service, then it's super easy to provide, you know, nice maps with your own location. So in this case, it has the location of the stadiums. So that's also a nice feature. Yeah, so you're encouraged to use the data service to build. And if you have question, you know, I can. The idea is to keep it small, simple. Cool.